Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I think I got caught in the mountain.
You got trapped.
Okay. Yeah,
You got trapped in the 8th dimension.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's my home. My home planet is the 10th planet. So
I'm just here to explain the watermelon. That's my purpose.
yes, I was wondering about that. That's on my list of things I don't understand.
Okay,
How are you doing, Scott?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. For those that may not have sort of got the references there or know what we're talking about, we're going to be talking about a film about some alien beings, two factions from the same planet coming to ours to fight their battle and being directed by, intervened by Earthlings. And it's not Transformers.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. We are going to be talking about the 1984 film, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Through the 8th Dimension. This is a favourite of mine, and Julian, this was the first time for you, and so really let's get into that because I've got obviously I'll be voicing my opinions later. But what are your initial thoughts then coming at this for the first time?
Well, I mean, I will say my first impressions were I really enjoyed the remake of this better than the original. I mean, Back to the Future is a great movie. It is so clear that Back to the Future takes so much, especially from those first 15 minutes or so. With the car, the streaks disappearing, the weird contraption that makes this possible, and a portal shooting out of the car. I mean,
well, it even took Christopher Lloyd. It even took Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah. I mean, so as time went on, I thought I always admire weird movies. I admire, sort of just the balls it takes to make some of these movies that don't make sense. And I'm a big admirer of Ed Wood. Having said that, I think by the end of the movie, I wound up thinking there's a lot wrong with this movie. It's not enjoyable to me, is the ultimate takeaway that I decided was my tagline. So explain to me how I'm wrong. Explain to me your love.
I don't think you are wrong. This film is very flawed, and it's some of its flaws are almost intentional. Others, I think, come from budget and other bits and pieces, some storytelling stuff. I love this film because the weirdness is a big factor. It clearly doesn't care, that the intention is sort of you're going to drop in and you're going to just follow the adventures of this guy and his crew, Buckaroo Banzai and the Cavaliers, and it's beyond that, the plot is almost irrelevant. With the sort of the red Lectroids and the black Lectroids and Dr. Lazardo, it's almost irrelevant. It's because this is just it's almost like set pieces sort of kind of stuff, isn't it? It's there to be it's just that little bit weirder. Right, this scene's now going to be slightly weirder than the next one. There feels like there's a Terry Gilliam influence on this film. There's a feel of Brazil to it for me. But the other thing as well is I love it as a sort of. It comes in '84, and it wants to sort of have a commentary on not quite action heroes, because action heroes hadn't really been around that point, but it's jumping back into the pulp heroes narrative, and so this thing of the early '80s where pulp heroes had come back, sort of this film's clearly got somebody who wants to sort of say a little bit about Star Wars, Indiana Jones, these kinds of characters. Buckaroo is clearly Doc Savage, and his crew. And so I don't know, there's just something about it, like you just go, yeah, no, it's just a fun adventure. Like it's just a silly adventure. And I love the fact that this isn't the first one. Like this isn't an origin story.
Right.
There's barely, although having said that, there's a deleted, and I watched it because I hadn't seen it for a while, but there's a deleted opening to this film, and it's on the disc I've got, and it's actually sort of like almost like a Buckaroo Banzai origin story, and it works better with the opening of the film. So the opening film you probably saw is it says Buckaroo Banzai and the Adventures Across the Eighth Dimension, and it pans across like a bunch of sandbags, and then it goes into the thing with the booster car, and then he does his experiment. Well, before that, it goes back to 1958, and you see his parents trying to attempt the exact same experiment he's about to attempt in 58, but they both get killed. And so it's taking place at the same location, and weirdly, Jamie Lee Curtis plays his mum, and so it gives you this note of, you learn why he was called Buckaroo Banzai, because his dad is Japanese but wanted to have an American name, and he felt that Buckaroo was suitable. So it has all these things, which again, it goes back to this idea of Doc Savage, this thing of being influenced by the parents and all this other stuff. So I don't know, there's just something about this film I really enjoy digging into. It's this film that's like it's a film you can enjoy digging into because of all the silliness in it. Like, Penny Pretty is another example. Like, it's not it's revealed, but not really revealed that she's the twin sister of his dead wife.
Wife, and they didn't know they were twin sisters, and it's mentioned in like a bit of dialogue later as he's taking a break from fighting aliens.
Yeah, but like literally, it's also true that his wife, who was the Queen of the Netherlands, was killed by his big nemesis, Zhang Ji, I think his name is, who's clearly like a parody of Dr. Fu Manchu. And so there's all these little nuggets. I'm like, pull on that, sort of thing. So it's more of like an Easter egg film, and fun little nods. Like this is book 4, or even maybe more. This could be like book 14 of a series of adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah, it does have that kind of feel. And I think you make it sound like much cooler than my experience watching it was. Another of my first impressions is, Peter Weller is the wrong casting choice. He looks like he's 50. That entire, like, so much of this movie depends on you thinking that him and his squad are cool. Yeah. And I never once think that they're cool. He managed to make Michael J. Fox playing a guitar look super realistic, even the fashion, there's that that cut at the end over the credits as they're all joined and whatever, that's been sort of influential. Even then, I admire the fact that there are like just shots of their body parts. It's like it's MTV. It's the clothes are as important as the people. I like that kind of stuff, except the clothes aren't good. Like there's no. It's like, I don't know. It's like, the most interesting thing is like the white 80s giant oversized jacket.
Perfect Tommy, yeah. Yeah.
Like, I dig that, but mostly, so they seem old. They don't seem cool. They don't seem like people who I met on the street. I'd be like, oh, who's that? Buckaroo Banzai. I'd be like, who's that, dweeby guy and his,
I agree. I think this is the thing, and this is the difference between then and now. So I totally agree. I think Peter Weller is totally miscast. I like the rest of the cast. I like the fact the rest of the cast are so different. Clancy Brown as Rawhide. Firstly, like, Clancy Brown's cool in anything. Like, soon would become the Kurgan in Highlander. So that was my real first introduction to him. But like Jeff Goldblum, this is the earliest Jeff Goldblum I know, I think. And he's still Jeff Goldblum. Like, he's still like, weird and affable and nice. And like, I love the fact that he's a doctor. So when they tell him to turn up to become part of this band, like he turns up dressed as a cowboy in chaps, like woolen chaps, and they're all a bit. They all start taking. They are having pops at him. So I do like the cast, but Peter Weller doesn't act as an anchor to this film. That I completely agree with, especially in '84 when you have got larger than life action heroes coming out of the woodwork. I mean, at this point you've already got like Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Not saying I'd want someone that big or that sort of bombastic, but you need someone with charisma, with real gravitas and charisma, for you to go, yeah, I completely buy that person is a scientist, brain surgeon, musician, adventurer. You've got to have that twinkle in the eye for you to be able to believe all that. And I think Peter Weller sometimes comes across too sort of po-faced in this role, too self-serious, and he's like that. I mean, if you ever listen to or even see any of the sort of special behind the scenes stuff for RoboCop, how he took sort of like ballet lessons and interpretive dance lessons to be able to move like RoboCop, which none have worked, by the way, because he did all of that without the suit, and then he put the suit on and realized he couldn't do any of it. But that's besides the point. We'll get to that one day. Yeah, I don't know. He is the one flaw in this film for me, is Weller, because it sort of doesn't work. However, I do feel he's balanced out by everybody else.
I'm thinking that's the one flaw.
Oh, is it from a casting standpoint? I love John Lithgow in this film. Like John Lithgow, to me, is just like
so
I
let's
love
talk
John
about Lithgow. I mean, I like John Lithgow. I'm happy when I see Lithgow, and I remember him from the '80s quite fondly. Boy, is he! Like this is, I guess, what this prefigures like Third Rock from the Sun. But like he's hamming it up, right? But I don't think it works. I mean, like when he gives the Hitler-esque speech, and he's like contorting his body, I think, yeah, I mean, there's a version of this that would work, but he's so, I know he's supposed to be like adapting to the Earth's climate or something, but like, I don't know. It's
so
not really.
Yeah, again, there's bits missing because the thing is, I've read the novelization and there are totally bits missing out of this film. So Dr. Lizardo, in the book, like it's a split personality. They are constantly fighting for control of the body. And when he's in this hospital at the beginning, he is Dr. Lizardo because he's on medication. And so there's a moment when he actually something happens and he doesn't get his medication. And that time when he electrocutes himself, amplifies or nullifies the medication to allow John Warfren to take over. That sort of, so in the book, that's the point of that. It's just a silly moment in the film.
What other personality is he fighting with?
So there's two. So in 1938, when you see that experiment, and you see the flashback later in the film, and that's Dr. Lizardo. Okay, so Dr. Lizardo is a human, and Dr. Lizardo is fired at that wall, and you have Dr. I forget his name, the Japanese guy. He's going, no. And when he goes through the wall, you see all the electroids in the 8th dimension are pouring at him and all that sort of thing. In that moment, one of them, John Warfren, transfers his consciousness into Dr. Lizardo. So Dr. Lizardo is now populated by Dr. Lizardo and
totally
John
did not
Warfren.
get that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not clear in the film. So the fact is that there are two personalities in there. So that electrocuting stuff, when he zaps his ears and his tongue and stuff, is him making sure he stays in control, and that's when he escapes from the hospital. And it's that overthrust. It's this sort of the oscillation overthruster is what triggers it, because he's like, they've perfected the technology which allowed him to escape the 8th dimensions, and now he can take that technology and get his brethren out. However, like there's clearly others actually in our dimension that have just travelled to Earth, which is Christopher Lloyd and Tom Noonan and all this other stuff. So
to bring their race war here.
Yes, literally, literal race war. Yeah, so that's the thing. But that speech he gives later on, there's something I love about that, because he was their dictator. He was the leader of the black electroids, the bad electroids, and so
the red ones.
The red electroids.
Yeah, the black ones are the good guys.
That's oh, sorry. Once. Yes. Yeah.
Even if they're portrayed as like Jamaican,
John Parker. Yeah. that's problematic, but it's still I kind of
Yeah.
like it. He has a really cool suit.
It's daft, and problematic, but it's kind of cool to have some Rastas,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's weird.
But that thing of like, I love the fact that like he's been trapped away for like since the 38, so it's 50 years. This film sort of suggests, because you forget this is obviously 84. I kept forgetting the time frame, so it's been 50 years. And so when he gives that speech at Yo-Yo Dying Proportions, and he's giving it's supposed to be like a Mussolini. He's going for that sort of like the big sort of like gestures and all this other stuff. He thinks that everyone's going to be behind him. And he's all into it. He's all sort of like, I'm taking over. This is the revolution. We're going to take out the 10th planet back. And everyone else is just like, yeah, woo. And I love the fact that overacting to me is sort of like he's still struggling to control his body, but he's trying to give this really massive, rousing speech that he thinks everyone's going to be sort of like, he thinks is going to be like some first order kind of speech. And everyone's going to be like, Sieg Heil. And everyone's just like, yay. So they're all done with it. They're all past it. It's only him now that's driving this. Especially when
I
you
didn't
see
pick up on that either. I mean, because sometimes you have to wonder, like, okay, what was the budget here? What were the concerns when they shot this? Seemed to me like they were into it. I didn't, I mean, they know what to say. It's like, when are we going to get there? Soon,
Yeah.
Okay, well, they know the call and response, right? They know the script.
But none of them are really paying attention. Like they're all in different places around the factory, and it keeps cutting back to the one played by Christopher Lloyd, who's just sat there like his head in his hands. He's like, "What is going on?" Big booty, yeah, John Boutte, yeah, Big Boutte. So he's just got his head in his hands, and he's like, because they didn't want him. They've been just getting on with things. They've just been living on planet Earth quite happily. And again, like, what's not made clear is they've gone to the presentation about the oscillation overthruster. They're investigating it of their own accord, because they're like, oh, okay, we could be getting our people out, but it's only then that John Warfarin comes out and basically buggers up their plans. So no one wants him around. He's just a distraction. So yeah, it's this thing of like, there's so much there, but it's not clear. It takes multiple viewings. Like the first couple, I've watched this quite a few times now, and I do pick up bits and pieces as I go along when I've watched it, and I've gone, oh, okay, I didn't quite get that before, or like, I think I understand this scene better now. So yeah.
Okay, so help me with another question. I mean, the eighth dimension is in the title, and it apparently it has to do with the space between atoms. Which, okay, this is fine. I mean, that is what it is. It's actually not bad as movie science goes. But these aliens are on the 10th planet. A spaceship lands. Why do they need to go into the eighth dimension? Why is the eighth dimension a part of this plot at all?
Okay, so there was a war. John Warfarin was the leader of this red lectoid revolution,
and they were banished like the Phantom Zone.
Exactly. So the eighth dimension is like their Phantom Zone. So all these sort of, basically they were given a choice: join the goodies, or you are banished. And so at some point in the history, these red lectoids were banished to the eighth dimension. On Earth, so as far away from the sort of from the 10th planet as possible. But in doing so, at the same time, a bunch of red lectoids that didn't want to get banished fled the 10th planet and actually went to Earth. And so they've been living there, hiding under the sort of the banner of Yo-Yo Dying Solutions since the 30s. Because what you hear is it's sort of part of the plot. It's mentioned that the Orson Welles invasion, the hoax in 1938 wasn't. It was it was played as a radio play. They say no, it actually was a warning, but then he was told to sort of say no, it was a hoax. And what that warning, yes, and what it actually was the red lectoids coming to Earth to follow up these people, because they
but they were coming physically without using the eighth dimension.
Yes, because they were sort of like refugees. They were running from being sent to the eighth dimension. because others had already been sent to the eighth dimension. So there's like a massive like political plot behind all this.
Yeah.
It's never fully explained. Like it's sort of there, but you've got to really sort of pick away at it. So like so John Big Boutte and the others, John Smallberries and all those others, they're all sort of imagine Nazis hiding in Brazil.
Right. Yeah.
That sort of thing. They've ran away and escaped being sent to the eighth dimension.
Okay, so right. So the point at the end of getting the oscillator
Overthruster. Yeah.
Overthruster is not to be able to take off, but that will allow them, in theory. I mean, it seems like it's used as a device that lets them take off and get back to the 10th planet and conquer it. But in fact, it's a device that would, I mean, as established, it would allow you to go into the eighth dimension.
Yes.
Is the idea that they're going to then escape into the atmosphere and then in the atmosphere rescue
That
their
bit's really,
people
no, I
from
think,
the eighth dimension?
No, I think they're planning on going back to the 10th planet with the Overthruster to then access the eighth dimension and bring out all the loyalists to John Warfren. That bit's a bit unclear because to me, I've always been like, just release them all on Earth,
Right.
and then fly back. But the point is that they've got the Overthruster. They want the Overthruster because that allows them to open up the portal to the eighth dimension, which will get all of his armies out, and then he can take over the 10th planet again.
I will say I do like the standing water. I do like the flight suit made out of flesh. I do like some of the just like weird random choices, and how just alien bizarre some of this is. I mean, there's a delight in sort of seeing a movie, that just goes for it and just says, I mean, you could tell there was a meeting, at which it was decided, why isn't there sort of flight suit straps, instead of seatbelts, they have a fleshy thing hanging from the ceiling, why not? Yeah, okay, let's go with that. That sounds more Gilliam, more bizarre, and sounds fun. I do like that stuff. And I like the broadcast. I didn't like the sort of Mussolini Hitler speech, but I did like the I mean, I think they could have done more with it, but I love the broadcasts that are continuously going propaganda on the loop in the base. I did think that was quite fun.
Yeah, it is good. I mean, there's some of the designs and sort of thoughts. So I've always taken it as well. That ship, because it's not like a built ship. The Lectroid ship it's a living thing. I've always thought of it as like they're flying this sort of like they've adapted or they've sort of this living thing because it looks all fleshy inside and it had wings. The one that crash lands has wings, but then becomes like a pod and all this other stuff. And I like the fact that I said they're dedicated to the mission. That sort of like John Parker comes down with two of the Lectroids. One falls off and like cracks his head and dies. Then John Parker sort of runs for it. But there's one inside just sat there, and he gets a message, and he's like, "No, you can't be captured. You're gonna have to detonate." And he's all like, "Yeah, well, all in the cause," and does it. So there's a lot more to this, but it's all in the background. Like it's clear that they're trying to. You are the almost like the perspective character in this is Buckaroo Banzai. You are introduced to this situation and you follow Buckaroo Banzai. But even Buckaroo Banzai, at one point, he meets up with the rest of the Cavaliers. And they're trying to explain this thing about Orson Welles and stuff. And even he's like, sorry, what? We were talking about Yo-Yo dying before, and what about this? Like, he's not privy to the whole plot. So, yeah, it is unclear.
It is a complicated plot.
It is. It's overly complicated, like massively overcomplicated. And that's sort of one of the reasons I kind of like it, because it is, again, it's a bit like we've been talking about other things as well, that this is a bit of an FU. You're like, you're going to step into this, but you've got to keep up. Even the ending, like the ending, the final section of the very ending of the film is New Jersey, or Jeff Goldblum tries to bring Penny back, but doesn't. She dies. But then she's brought back by one of the Lectroids. And they do something, and then it goes back to, and as he's sort of kissing, as Buckaroo is kissing her, you get this sort of thing. It's one of the lecturers going, "So what? Big deal." And you're like, "What? What's like?" It's almost like well, yeah, we bring people back to life all the time. I've now taken it. Well, we bring back people back all the time. What's the big deal about this? But yeah, it is bizarre. It is very bizarre.
That brings to mind another one of my gripes, which is that the dialogue is like written by somebody who English is clearly not their first language. Okay. So like every time, for example, they'll talk to Buckaroo and they'll say like, "Oh, we've got to do this." And he'll say something like, "Oh, is that all?" Oh, but he'll say it in some weird way where like a word's wrong. Right. So like, "Oh, all that, period." What the hell does that mean? Does that mean a yes or a no? It clearly means a yes in a movie, but it's like, that's not what he's saying. I kind of get from the language is just constantly a little off in a weird way.
No, I agree with that. And again, I think they're trying to tap into, I don't know, there's a weird thing about they're trying to tap into 30s pulp ideals. I've read quite a few Doc Savages and stuff, and it does have that feel in that way of like they're trying to almost they want to make Buckaroo slightly alien, like he's slightly separated from everybody. He's so above everybody, and they keep trying to do it by doing certain things, like just saying, he's a rock star. Brain surgeon adventurer like isn't enough. Like they're like, "Oh, we've got to make him slightly different in these ways," and it doesn't it doesn't work. And again, I wonder, like you say, it's the dialogue, fine, but if you had the right, again, if the casting was better, and you had someone with that charisma, like it wouldn't be a problem because they'd be able to pull it all off with a twinkle in their eye. The delivery would probably be that little bit more. You need someone with a bit of cheese. You know what I mean? That's someone who's got a bit of a. And also, I'd say you need someone who's a bit of a beefcake. Like Paul Weller, like I say, he's too small to play this kind of character. I don't know who would replace him within the 80s at this point. But yeah,
So I mean, part of my bias there is, I mean, yeah, you're right. I think the whole team does not look very convincing handling guns, right? And there's even the joke of like, holding it backwards, which nobody would ever do to a gun. But, I found myself thinking of, a movie that is also off the rails, but that I like, which is Valerian, The City of a Thousand Planets. Both of these probably might do better. Both of those probably might do better, as you pointed out, sort of like broken up as a serial.
Yes.
I could probably follow this and be like, yeah, they're kind of forgetting the last serial a little, the last episode a little. That detail's not really just important in this one. The mystery of who this woman is just gets rough for a couple episodes. That's kind of charming in a serial. But, this goes back to sort of one of my biases is that as horrible as that actor is as Valerian, he looks pretty. He looks cool. He's got that kind of je ne sais quoi where it's like, I don't believe you're a secret agent. I don't believe anything you're doing, right? But you look good doing it. And
I would dispute
none
that.
of these.
Yeah.
You would dispute that?
With Dane DeHaan, yeah.
Okay. See, I mean, you remember his name. But I mean, he's a pretty boy. I mean, he's Leo DiCaprio Leo DiCaprio was a better actor even in Romeo and Juliet. But I mean, he's the young, it's a young Leo DiCaprio. Maybe this is my American bias, but I can't believe, I don't know. I want him to be pretty. I want him to be more physically attractive and younger, or, I mean, you could go the more grisly route and I could be sold on it, sort of Harrison Ford route or something like that. But I mean, none of that crew is supposed to be, he's supposed to be a rock star. He's supposed, you're supposed to believe that crew is cool.
Yeah.
And the one thing I knew about Buckaroo Banzai is like, it's supposed to be cool and fun. And I want that crew to be, fashionable. I want to look at them and go, now I know the standards in the 80s, probably fortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for men and for women, none of those people could get jobs today, men or women,
Yeah.
probably. But I do find myself wanting that youthful sort of pretty. I want them to look pretty, I want them to look younger.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. See, I think one of the things I like about part of this is they are so different. Like, cause it's a literal, and like quite recently we just had the Suicide Squad. This idea, and it's not so. I'm always attracted to this idea of a band of misfits. Like these guys are supposed to be pretty intelligent. They're all part of the Banzai Institute. But the ones you're really into, and also you don't get to meet everyone. Like there's a several point where they talk about a character that's not even there,
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the key ones, the key three, I would say, of the Hong Kong Cavaliers in this group, apart from Banzai, is Rawhide, Perfect Tommy, and Reno, and they are so, which is, I can't really, I don't know the actors' names, but I love the fact that they are so different. Like Clancy Brown's like 6'4". The guy's like, he's huge, but and he's called Rawhide because he's supposed to be a cowboy. He wears a cowboy hat once in this film, but I think he looks great. Perfect Tommy is one of my favorites because he's such a dick. Like he's not. He's not, he's supposed to be the sort of like the charisma one. He's the one that gets all the ladies, but he has to be reminded several times. Like there's a moment when Banzai says to him about giving Penny his coat. He says, "Why?" He says, "Because you're perfect." He's like, "Yeah, you have a point." Like they're not. They're just weird characters. Reno as well, sort of like this. He's quite short, and and then you get obviously Jeff Goldblum coming in as who's nerd cool is even coming through then. Is this weird character as New Jersey, and the fact that he cracks the plot, but I don't know. I like the fact that they are this misfit group. Like they're not too pretty, but I do agree. Again, if the center of this, the heart of this, should be someone who's super charismatic, super sort of like you should believe should be a presence, should walk into a room and absolutely be a presence. That's the point of, like I say, going back to Doc Savage.
Mm-hmm.
When you read those Doc Savage books, like he's called the Man of Bronze because he's so tanned because he sort of worked out in the sun for so long, but he's sort of like, he's not massive, he's just perfectly chiseled, and he's super intelligent, but he's charming and sort of, but he can be abrupt and
super confident.
Confident. Yeah. That's the point. Like,
he's a male Mary Sue.
Exactly. Yeah. He's the so I don't know what would that be? The Kevin Sue. But he is, he's the Dwayne Johnson of the 30s. But
I just vomited.
I wouldn't cast, but again, I wouldn't cast like The Rock or Dwayne Johnson as Buckaroo Banzai. You need someone smaller, looks sort of normal, but just needs like tons of charisma.
Mm-hmm. And whereas like when he's giving that, like, it's kind of charming how he leaves the president, right, and he's giving a press conference in which he's announcing, extraterrestrial life in the 8th dimension, and the world has changed, and he just leaves, But it comes off more as like Elon Musk, or more, like it comes off more as like a distracted inventor who just doesn't give a shit about, fame and popularity, than, it comes off as like, oh, who's that idiosyncratic smart guy, as opposed to, I have so much confidence that I, cut off the president, and he's lucky to get this 5 minutes with me.
Yeah, he's supposed to be confident yet humble. He's supposed to sort of like, that's what you need to be getting. That's where the charisma comes in. So he's not like Tony Stark. He's not that extreme. He's a combination of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. That's I
was thinking of Rick on Rick and Morty. He's the genius inventor that the president has to call, right? Yeah. Except he's not that much of a dick.
No, it's just interesting that, like you say, that the idea for Buckaroo Banzai, and it's really interesting as well. A note we'll get onto about you say about the sort of the guy who wrote this. The idea of Buckaroo Banzai was supposed to be this super cool, and I think that's one of the reasons this film flopped, is because Peter Weller at the heart of it doesn't work. Peter Weller's a very intense actor. You know, he does some really good stuff. Like, you know, RoboCop. I love, you know, you and I love RoboCop. I think it's phenomenal.
In fact, every time I look at Peter Weller, I'm like, why does he not have that hole in his face?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't look right without that hole in his face.
And so yeah, no, and so I don't feel that he's not the right fit for the role, and I do think that is a bit of a problem with this film. It really is. But I do find that he's made. If you had a stronger central role, I'm perfectly happy with the casting of everybody else. I think it all works fine. But you know, and I love the fact it taps into so many other things. Like you've got the Banzai regulars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is clearly
like
sort of
the Tom Strong fan club kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and also the Baker Street irregulars, which is you know, so it's tapping into like Sherlock Holmes as well and all this other stuff. So it's just full of these things where I'm like, ooh, I get that. And so you know, it appeals on so many levels. And I love the concept. I love the adventure story of it as well.
For me, when it helped me to realize what kind of movie this was.
Yeah.
When they introduce, you know, I forget his name, but the black kid who's part of the irregulars.
Yes.
You know, and they introduce him, and 5 minutes later, his dad rescues Buckaroo Banzai with a hanging, you know, ladder from a helicopter. And I thought, oh, okay. They know how dumb that is, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is the end of the chapter of the serial, right? And I thought, okay, I need to readjust my calibrations for what this wants to be doing.
So this is where I think we need to talk about the production of this film, because you're right. This film should know how. Is it a parody? Is my question. Is this film a parody of a genre that's gone? So it's not quite Naked Gun level, you know, or Hot Shots level sort of parody. You know, it's not sort of that slapstick Leslie Nielsen level humor. But is this meant to be a parody of, you know, in the vein of sort of, I recently watched The Fiendish Plot of Fu Manchu, which is, you know, a Peter Sellers parody, more like a gentle parody. Is it supposed to be a parody of those pulp action adventures from the sort of the 30s and 40s and 50s? Is that what it's supposed to be? In which case, it needs to lean into the dumbness and the sort of the silliness of it way more. For those moments, you do need, and you almost need the editing to be that as well. A big edit of Buckaroo Banzai about to be hit by a truck, and you get like that. You almost get the sort of like, you know, same bat time, same bat channel, and then cut to the ladder falling down to give you those moments. But they don't. They cut straight through them. So the guy that wrote this, in fact, I'm going to double check. No, it's the guy who wrote it. Earl Mac Rauch also wrote the novelization. He contributed quite heavily to another film that came, I think, a year or so later that does this whole thing a lot better, and that is Big Trouble in Little China. And so with someone like Kurt Russell playing the Jack Burton role of the overconfident American, you know, white savior going into sort of like Little China, but being a complete buffoon, and then playing up the whole thing, you can see where they were going. And where John Carpenter went, oh, I know exactly what you're doing. This is ludicrous. We're going to fully lean into the sort of the ridiculousness of it, and we're going to have that Fu Manchu type Asian character that's going to be, you know, proper villainous and really cool. But, you know, we know what our ancestry is. We know what the legacy of this is. That film sort of got it right with the tone. Where I think this film, the director, W.D. Richter, I think sort of took it too serious. He was looking at Indiana Jones rather than, you know,
well,
like
Star Wars with the, you know, the serial influence on both of those movies.
Yes, and I think that was actually sort of an influence. They were looking to franchise this rather than go, isn't this funny? Isn't this fun? And I think that's the problem, is that it takes itself a little too serious, which is what leads to the casting of Peter Weller. Yeah. And maybe Kurt Russell would have been a good shout for that character, you know, young Kurt Russell. But...
I can see that. Personally, I can't stand Kurt Russell. I mean, everything he's ever been in, it's just like, even if I like the movie, he grates on me. He's the opposite of like the people who you just like to watch. You know, like I kind of like to watch him, and yet I kind of hate to watch him at the same time.
I will admit, Kurt Russell is one of my favorites. He's sort of, he's up there. Yes, no, but like,
But I could see Kurt Russell pulling it off. I mean, he has that sort of like charisma. You know, my only complaint is he always comes off as stupid, no matter who he's playing. Whereas like Arnold Schwarzenegger, might. I mean, I don't think he's dumb in real life, but I mean, he might come off as dumb, but he doesn't come off as annoyingly dumb. Like Kurt Russell comes off to me as annoyingly dumb.
I think that was the type of thing he played. But again, I'm not going to defend Kurt Russell in this.
But that might not work for this because he's got to be. But I see what you're saying with charisma. I mean, it could work better.
But can you see the sort of the tone that they were probably going for? Yeah,
I see a fight in our future.
I can see us. Yeah, we're going to be talking The Thing, and but yeah, no, that thing of like Big Trouble in Little China. So so the Earl Mac Rauch contributed heavily to that, and I think that is a better representation of what this film should have been or was aiming for. And I think, because to be fair, Big Trouble in Little China flopped as well, so it's not like that was a big hit. But that's become a much more successful cult hit, where this hasn't. And I think its tone is what lets this down as well.
I did find myself thinking about Escape from New York as far as tone goes, which is another Russell vehicle. Well, that's maybe a little more serious, but it still is like, golly gee, just have fun with this wacky adventure, and you get that tone right away. So I do see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with this, that they're trying to lean into, they want sort of Snake Plissken, even though Snake Plissken's a ridiculous character anyway, and he's a take of so much more. But yeah, that's the problem. I think, they're not entirely sure, because you get scenes like the scene with the introduction of Penny Pretty, which comes across
about that scene.
Yeah, because it comes across really cringy.
Yes,
and it's not good. But again, I think it could work with the right level. Firstly, the first thing is they're supposed to be these massively successful rock stars. Like, everybody seems to know who Buckaroo Banzai is. There's like 20 people at this thing. Clearly, they didn't have enough money for extras.
Oh my God. Okay, so you were saying that Mr. Perfect, what's his name?
Perfect Tommy.
Perfect Tommy is kind of an asshole. But in fact, in that scene where he's being asked to give his coat, his jacket, Buckaroo Banzai has a jacket on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, so that question isn't, the answer isn't because it's a woman who needs it. The real question is, hey, I'm above it all. I'm the asshole. I'm demanding you to give your jacket over. Why? Because I asked, and that's really, so I don't think that, Perfect Tommy is a dick in that scene. I think Buckaroo Banzai is, if anything. And in that scene in the bar, I mean, so for viewers, we're talking about they're playing guitar. He's playing guitar,
and saxophone. There's lots of it's very 80s. There's lots of saxophone going on as well.
Yes, and he apparently hears a woman sobbing in the crowd. There's a woman sitting alone. She's been kicked out of the Y. She somebody who's had to live at the Y. I identify, and she is depressed. She has no money. And so this poor woman is sitting alone, and he says, put a spotlight on her.
Yeah.
Stick a camera out. And while everybody's staring at her. And, and obviously, like, the social anxiety a woman at the end of her, string would feel. I just think, what a fucking dick you are. And then he doesn't say, like, oh, my God, I put you on the spot. I'll take care of you. He's just like, you know what? I'll play you a song on the piano. I mean, which is also just complete dickish nonsense. And that song is about, like, at the end of my room, like, just horrible, depressed song. Like, this is not going to make her feel less alone. This is going to make her feel like, I should kill myself, which is then what she tries to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's misinterpreted as an attack. But I just thought through that whole thing, Buckaroo Banzai is just such a fantastic dick that it's hard for me to ever forgive him.
I agree with that. It's a really it's a difficult scene to watch because it doesn't work. I agree. Because the other thing as well is the only reason she doesn't commit suicide is a waitress bumps into her. So it's not like she decides not to. Like that scene could have ended very differently. Buckaroo doesn't even talk her down, which is what it should be. That scene should be him, like I say, not putting the spotlight on it or anything like that. It should be, can someone, let's get her out the audience, let's get her away from, let's console her, and he talks her down. But he doesn't, like you say, he puts a spotlight on her and then tells, and you're right again. In fact, now I reconsider it. Like he tells Perfect Tommy to get a microphone, and Tommy's like, "What? Why?" And he's like, "Just do it."
Well, the other thing is he keeps calling her Peggy instead of Penny,
Yeah,
like over and over, and she keeps correcting him, and he keeps ignoring it. That seems pretty clear. No, I'm supposed to think Buckaroo Banzai is a phenomenal douche.
Yeah, you're not supposed to, but he does. It doesn't work because the thing about that scene is as well. Like she is to him, out of the crowd, she is the visage of his dead wife, and it's supposed to have knocked him for six. And his wife's name was Peggy. So when she says my name's Penny, he misses me. He's obviously mishearing it. Did you say Peggy? Like he's really clutching. Like it's supposed to be a moment of grief for him. And it doesn't come across like that. Like I completely agree. Because to him, and I love the fact that it is weird that all the other Cavaliers keep saying like, "Are we going to talk about this? Like she looks like Peggy. Like, are we going to discuss this?" And like none of them are like going. No one wants to confront Buckaroo about it. They're all saying like, we've got to talk to him. This is not right. And if anything, there's a part of me that feels really uncomfortable with the ending of this film because he ends up with Penny, but I'm like, yeah, but you haven't formed a relationship with her. You haven't spent any time with her. Like, you're with her because she looks like your dead wife. And
that's incidentally my first pickup line at the bar.
You look like my dead wife.
Baby, you look like the spitting image of my dead wife.
Yeah. So I agree that whole bar scene, and the thing is, it also holds that scene also contains one of the most quoted lines of Buckaroo Banzai, which is "No matter where you are, or no matter where you go, there you are." Which is actually the point of that is you can't run away from your problems because as soon as you get somewhere else, there it's you're still carrying that stuff, which is a great piece of advice. But again, the dialogue doesn't quite work because he's addressing the crowd, not her. He's telling them off for sort of laughing at her situation or for sort of being mean. He says, "Don't be mean." He says, come on, let's not be mean. You're the one. You're the one that's just put the spotlight on her. Like you're the one that's being slightly mean. And he says, "Don't forget, no matter where you go, there you are."
Which is kind of like, screw you, lady. You're like you're suffering.
Yeah,
you're gonna keep suffering. Good luck with that. Now I'm gonna play a song.
Yeah, if anything, I do really think this is probably the worst scene in the film, because of that whole thing makes me feel uncomfortable. Like I want this to be played out. Again, this is where you should get to see the compassionate side of Buckaroo. Why did Peggy fall in love with him? Let's see that compassionate side. Let's see that side that she fell in love with. Have him talk her down in a side room and have this conversation. You could even still have the line when she's like, "If I can't kill myself, I'm just going to keep running." And you can be like, "Well, no matter where you go, there you are," and you can talk her down from that. But yeah, I agree. I have problems.
Why they end up together? Okay, because it is weird. You're completely right to point that out. It is also super weird to me that I mean, she spends like the last 30 minutes being tortured in this movie. Okay,
Yeah.
And then the last time we see her is with this alien slug going down a boy, and it's one of these ridiculous setups where it is very movie serial, but where you think, you have guns, right? Maybe you want to torture her, but this is an awful long. So you think this is set up to have somebody rescue her at the last moment. Nobody comes in and rescues her.
No.
You never see it. This never comes back. No drama has ever gotten out of this. You just hear off screen that she's been rescued, and then she seems to be dead, yada yada yada. she's alive at the end. So they don't even show her death. They don't show her being rescued. This like you set up a clock and then, nothing happens. So my theory is she ends up with him because she likes being tortured.
Yeah.
There's no relationship there. She's just a massive masochist. And so and I guess she's at the end of the rope and her rope, and we're supposed to think like, okay, this is a great basis for a relationship. You look like my whatever I don't care about your personality, right? Because it does bother me that like even in that crowd shot at the end, okay, you have one woman and she spent half the movie being tortured and there because of who she looks like. You never ask a question about her personality, her suffering, and she's obviously, but she held on. She let herself be tortured rather than break. So I guess that's what he wants.
She's now joined the Hong Kong Cavaliers. Yeah, no, I agree. The ending, that ending does bother me because it is like, oh yeah, you're awake. Firstly, she's literally just been revived from death. So there's got to be a conversation there. And there's no one checking her or anything. Like it's very movie serial. I agree, but it should lean into those tropes more for that to work. For those moments to work, it needs to accept those tropes a little bit more and stop trying to be, because it's a bit too serious in some of those moments. It tries for the melodrama rather than going for sort of like, oh no, it should be more melodramatic in the sort of, in those sort of, it tries to be too serious.
It needs like the John Williams, like, Star Wars ending, it's like, like that romantic theme as he leans in and kisses her,
Yeah, exactly. It needs to sort of fall into some of those tropes. But yeah, I mean, the bit, that's the thing with this film. Like I say, it's missing bits, and it's sort of, I think tonally it's a bit all over the place. If I'm perfectly honest, it's hard to explain why I like this film so much. It's one of those things where I agree, because it is. I just sort of got into it, and I was like, I enjoy this film. There's a wackiness to this film, but I totally agree. Like, this is one of those few films that if I was to wake up tomorrow, because originally Kevin Smith was going to remake this as a TV series for Amazon. Fine, I'm not entirely. Kevin Smith is fine for many things, but if for example, if James Gunn, they wake up tomorrow and they're like, following the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's going to redo Buckaroo Banzai, I'd be like, good, remake it. Let's get James Gunn's a good choice. He can do this. He can do this weirdness well. He does good groups of sort of misfits. He can pull off those weird humor moments, but give it heart. Like, I think he's probably a good choice to do it. Let's get a good charismatic cast in there playing these things. This film would be a massive hit if they plugged some of these holes and got the tone right.
Yeah.
But there's bits that, like I say, they just don't work. However, I still like this idea. And again, we've talked about the watermelon. We didn't talk about. We mentioned it. And as you walk through it, so there's a scene, for those who haven't watched it, you probably should have done, but there's a film with they're sort of, so the Electroids have gotten into the Bonsai Institute, and they're going around, and Reno is accompanied by New Jersey, and they go through a room, and there's a watermelon that looks like it's under a compressor, and sort of New Jersey sort of goes, what's that doing there? So I'll tell you later. And then they leave the room, and it never comes up again. Like, it's completely sort of pointless. And it's sort of that, in that single moment, that is the sort of, you can sort of tell that that's almost like a statement of intent. It comes very well into the film, but that's sort of the point. It's like, oh yeah, there's going to be things in this film that are completely unrelated to this adventure that you're not going to have, we're not going to give you any information about. But, if you were to read this as a serial, that might be an Easter egg to a previous adventure. That's not a watermelon. That's actually a dragon egg or some other wacky thing that sort of, the Bonsai Institute sort of dealt with. It's a bomb that has to be applied under pressure from the crime syndicate or something like that. There'll be a reason for it. That is an Easter egg for a story that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way I can. That's the only way I can describe it.
That's really cool.
Which I think is a great idea, and it precedes Easter eggs in films, like Marvel Easter eggs and DC Easter eggs by decades. And so I appreciate that, because it's obviously, like you say, it's supposed to be a part of a serial. But again, if you're going to do that, then you need to really lead into the silliness of these serials, and it doesn't quite do that. So yeah, that's sort of the point of that was just any thoughts on that from a watermelon perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying about it. I think that's the best way to take it. I mean, I thought that, I mean, for me, I did take it as a sign, but I took it as a sign that, like, it's pretty clear they're not going to explain this, right? Yeah. And so I just took it as a sign of, like, yeah, you're just supposed to go along with this movie. If you haven't gotten, and like you say, it doesn't kind of fully commit to that tone. But I think with the helicopter rescue, that's pretty clear to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't take this movie very seriously. Have fun. With the watermelon thing, it's like, yeah, there are issues we're just not don't expect this plot to be explained. There's stuff that we're just gonna let hang. It's not important.
Weirdly, one of the things that pops into my head whilst watching this was a film I saw relatively recently that I thought was a massive, I thought was a massive misstep, and that was Zack Snyder's what's it, Army of the Dead, whatever it was, the thing where they go to Las Vegas, and so you go, oh, it's a heist movie in Vegas during a zombie apocalypse. Oh, this is going to be carnage. It's going to be full of silliness. Sort of like someone riding a Cadillac down the strip with a machine gun. It has a guy with a buzzsaw that he can hold. He's going to be stood at a pile of a bunch of dead bodies and all sorts of stuff. Like, there is a tone I'm expecting akin to maybe not Evil Dead 2, but like, a silliness quotation. Zombieland or that kind of thing. Yeah. And when you don't get that, you go, this sort of didn't quite get the mission. This didn't, he didn't get the sort of like what the intent of this was. It's his own film, which is fine, but I don't think he understood the mission. And I sort of feel that a little bit, with Buckaroo Banzai is, they didn't quite understand the mission. There was there's a miscommunication in this, and it may have even been with studios going like, we want a franchise film that's similar to, like we've had Indiana Jones and we've had Star Wars and we've had these other films. We want something to jump on the back of. And then they watched it and like, yeah, that's not it. Like this isn't that. This is a weird action film that sort of like, and they should have leaned into that more, I think. So I don't know. That's sort of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself thinking at multiple points, it's only a few years away, of Goldblum and Earth Girls Are Easy.
Yes.
Which, while not a great movie, knows it's a campy comedy from start to finish. And tells you that right away from the start. And this has elements of that, but then elements that, as you say, the tone is just incongruent with that.
Yeah.
And there's no sense of dangling plots and I mean, there's dumb stuff, but actually that has a much better and explained romance than this does.
Yes.
But but I find that incongruence. I agree with you. I mean, there is a sort of like campy sort of like Escape from New York sort of movie in this that I don't know if it would have been a hit, but at least would have been, I mean, I think what I want in these movies is for them to be unapologetically themselves.
Yes.
And to commit fully. And even if I don't like it, the degree to which they follow through on their own ideas, they, are still consistent, even if it doesn't work. They pound that into the ground and are consistent through until it kind of works. And you kind of admire them doing that. And this doesn't seem to have that.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's, you mentioned Earth Girls Are Easy. Like, there are other films that just go for it in that tone. The 80s were rife with these kinds of films where, like you say, usually in the horror genre, like horror seems to get this idea of like, oh no, like this is nonsense, but we are going to commit to this so much in this horror. Like, Critters is a good example. Like Critters fundamentally isn't a good film, but it's really fun. Like, and it knows it's silly. So you're like, okay, fine. Toxic Avenger, those trauma films, or like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, like they know what they are, and they, like you said, they're going to hammer it home to the extent where you go like, if you're either going to love it or you're going to go, not for me, move on. Buckaroo Banzai, sort of like, even with the title, Buckaroo Banzai, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Through the Eighth Dimension, is looking to mimic Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, whatever. It's looking to mimic that, but then it doesn't quite know if it's a serious action adventure film or it's a comedy. Is it a silly sci-fi comedy? And like I say, if this film had committed, just absolutely committed to some of those moments more, I think it would be. You're right, it wouldn't have been a success, but I think it would be a much bigger cult success today.
No, I agree. And I do think there is that sort. I mean, that is the way it's got to go, right? I mean, there is a sort of like campy, crazier version of this that, keeps, 80-90% of the dialogue intact, keeps most of, the plot intact. If anything, maybe adds a few things here and there, but lets you know right from the start, it's like it. I don't know. Maybe it needs an opener that does that for tone. Like, I'm thinking of like the Red Dwarf episode that opens with surfing. What is it? It's not surfing the shark. What is it? With the Nazi.
The Ace Rimmer one. Yes.
Yeah, the Ace Rimmer callback.
Yes. He saves. He surfs a crocodile. Yeah.
Surfs a crocodile. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is so over the top, where instantly lets you know this is what I'm dealing. And you could start with another, a little vignette of a different adventure of Buckaroo Banzai that kind of like establishes. I mean, of course, today would be like, Perfect Tommy, and you get the like screen lettering and the brief flashback.
That would be ace. That would be what you need. You get that mini adventure to establish the group. I think they'd cut the group down to that core group, because I mean that's even like the Shadow had a network, but like Doc Savage only had 4 or 5 guys. But Ace Rimmer, Chris Barry as Ace Rimmer is a better example of that ridiculousness of the character that Mary Sue, pulp Biggles kind of character than Buckaroo Banzai. Like, and the fact is, like, he is endlessly charming. You could you want to be able to watch this, and regardless of what he does, you want to be able to say about Buckaroo Banzai, what a guy. That's what you like. And that should be it. Like, he should be the Ace Rimmer character that as soon as he steps in the room, everyone should be like, everything's going to be okay now. He's here to save the day.
And you don't feel like that, right? I mean, from early on, I think, what a dick instead of what a guy, several times. And by the end, where he's like, yeah, we've got 2 hours, like I'm going to go in. Well, we'll just get that device back and also rescue the girl. But, blah, blah, blah. But the priority is the device. And I'm like, hold on a minute. I'm not going to follow your plan. I have no confidence in you. I don't understand that. But you're right. I mean, if it were Ace Rimmer, if it were played with that sort of delight, and I guess for me that's part of what I, not knowing what I was going to say about this movie, what I came down to is it's just not. It should have that kind of delight, and it has a little bit of an intellectual delight as I, see what they're doing and how they go for it. And there is a kind of delight of just sort of like, how the F did this get made? That I have a lot of the times. I enjoy weird stuff, but I wanted to have that, ideally that joy of that Ace Rimmer stuff. And it doesn't tickle me in quite the same way.
No, I agree. And so, I mean, I brought this in, and I've sort of bigged it up because I knew this was going to be like a Marmite film. You'd either be all in it or like you'd be like, what have you made me watch? And I will admit, like, I have defended. I will defend it. This isn't like one of my top 10 films. Like, it's definitely it's not. So I sort of like I will not die on the hill of defending Buckaroo Banzai. I will acknowledge its flaws, but again, like you say, there are bits in there's just a sort of there is a tone to this film that's missing, but there is stuff in this film I really enjoy. And again, I think it is part of the fact it is so weird. The other thing as well is it's pretty brutal. Like, again, like you mentioned sort of like Banzai being a bit of a dick, but like Rawhide doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And there's no heroic, there's not these heroic moments of saving him, sort of like, it's like, no, the Electroids got him and he takes it. Reno takes a shot in the arm early on, and at one point you're wondering if he's down. They do try and establish stakes in a way to say like, no, this crew could be taken out. Like, the Electroids are a legit threat. And so that I commend them for that. That, like, this isn't the sort of a completely safe crew. But again, like, it doesn't seem to carry on. That tone. So yeah, that's the thing as well. I'd also say, like you say, the one of the biggest things. So I think more than people, I just love John Lithgow in this film. I think of like. So he's just a wonder to watch. And I always like John Lithgow. When he calls him the guy who comes in to bring him his drugs or whatever. I forgot his words. I was like, watch your back, a monkey, a boy. It's just so over the top, so ridiculous.
Well, he knows what kind of movie this is, right?
Yes.
I mean, he knows
totally.
that tone that it should have.
Yeah, I think that there's a few in the cast that do. And I think all the people playing the Electroids know, like Christopher Lloyd, Tom Noonan, those guys, all those know what this is. When they're getting their makeup on, they're like, "Oh, we know what this is. We totally know. We totally understand what this film is." Like, I'm an alien.
Zygons, but sillier, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, one of them's wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Which tells me they've gone to the opticians.
Yeah.
So there's things like that you go, well, that makes no sense. So they know what they're doing. It's the Banzai side of things, I think, that is less coherent in that set. But even within that lot, I honestly think like the guy who plays Perfect Tommy sort of knows what film it is because he's sort of playing up that little bit.
And at least if out of all of their looks, I like his look the best, and it's because of the dyed hair. It's got that, there is a distinct look to him that I really dig.
And you want, if you were to do it and you were have them all to be, like, say, a bunch of good looking modern hero types, to have one called Perfect Tommy, the irony of having that a bunch amongst of sort of a group of really really good looking people would be great. I'd also probably, again, we often touch on this being 80s and stuff, like, if this is supposed to be the Banzai Institute, yes, you've got a Japanese contingent, but like, I would love it to be a much more diverse group.
Yeah.
Because you get some really cool characters in. But yeah, no.
There's the Japanese scientist. I think he's Japanese, and then there's the I think the only two black characters are the kid, who's part of the Irregulars and his father, and then
John Parker.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, it's not completely, it's not a completely white cast, because all the sort of the good guy Electroids are all African American. They're all black characters,
right?
And so, like you say, it's good to have that. It's nice nod to say that it's not the white guys that are the goodies. But again, even like John Parker gets sort of sidelined slightly. Like, this guy's seems to have superhuman strength. Like, he's jumping over like 10-foot walls and sort of stuff. Never used.
Yeah, those jumps were not great over the walls. The cutting there, but not bad enough that I mean, a more recent example of this is sort of like Kung Fu Hustle, which I'm a big fan of. Again, instantly right from the start what kind of movie it is. but like the jump over the walls isn't quite bad enough. Like I want it to be worse. Like I want like the sort of like Bionic Man kind of like sound effect. Yes.
And that's the thing, because I think, but I think that's budgetary. It wants to show some things as cool. This wants to be like Marvel level for some bits, but then silly for others. And again, to be fair, this is where I will touch on there are some modern films that have done this, where you've applied really good special effects to moments, but you're able to insert the humor or the sort of the silliness.
Gun is a great example to redo
this.
It's right up this alley.
Yeah, and so I think you can do that. And so even in TV, there's been weird TV shows. I think Netflix did a what was the Douglas Adams detective books? It's going to really bother me now. Gently.
Dirt Gently.
Dirt Gently. So they did
detective agency.
That's yes, the holistic. So they did 2 series of the holistic detective agency, and it's really good. It's proper weird. It really leans into the bizarre, but everything's played. Anything that's sort of to be a special effect is played to be realistic. They've gone with the budget, and it sort of adds to the weird because you're like, oh, it doesn't look cheap and campy. It looks legit, but you've still got these weird characters doing this stuff, and so it works, and that's what I think should be with this. Buckaroo and his crew should be just normal people, and the things going on around them should look great, and it should look like really good action, but still in a sort of a legit campy way, but not in a bad low budget B movie kind of way. All I'm talking myself into is this should be remade. This need, and in fact, anything now is the time to make a Buckaroo Banzai remake.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, and you have definitely convinced me that there is a good or at least fun movie hiding in this. And a lot of times
the book nails it. The book nails it, and I think that's because the guy who writes it wrote the novelization, and so the book is told from it's told by Reno. And it's so it leans into this idea of like the Dr. Watson, it's a journaling of these things. And so at the beginning is like, well, there are scenes that we weren't present for, but I'm just assuming these are what they said, sort of thing. And so it's got these, but then it goes off on weird little, it goes off on little tangents. The whole thing with Peggy and Penny is covered really well. The whole thing with Electroids is covered, but it has a humor. So as you're reading it, you're like, oh yeah, no, he knows exactly what he's writing. He's aiming for that, he knows this is a pulp adventure book, but he also knows that you're supposed to be smiling at it as you go. This isn't supposed to be a chore to work through. This isn't supposed to be a sort of like a serious, tryst on superheroes or pulp. No, he's just like, no, this is a cool adventure, but you're supposed to be thinking like, oh, this is silly, this is daft. And so the book is a much better capture of what that tone is. And funnily enough, there's a new book. He's written a new Buckaroo Banzai book. It comes out this year, and I'm actually quite excited for it. But that's this idea, because even the film ends with Buckaroo will turn with Buckaroo versus the crime syndicate. And again, in this film, they set up. You don't know it. In fact, you won't have a clue because you haven't read the book or the comic. This book is sort of alluding to what that next film will be. So at the beginning of the film, when Lizardo escapes from the hospital, he receives a package. And the package is, because him receiving that package is what instigates him, furthering his escape from. It's so in the book it explains that has come from this Zhang Chi, or the head of the crime syndicate, like Buckaroo's nemesis, and he sent him some stuff that's sort of going like, this oscillation overthrust is exactly what you need, and here's the instructions of how you can get it. And I've actually set up, so if you leave the prison, basically if you leave now, there's a car waiting for you outside. So this guy who leads the crime syndicate instigates and supports Lozada's escape from the hospital. You don't know any of that because the scene that explains that is cut from the film and it's never mentioned again. And obviously, they then mentioned about later there was also a deleted scene where Banzai completely explains how Peggy was killed, and that she was killed by this Zhang Chi.
Ah, okay.
So it's all good, and so when you hear that, like, he was the leader of the crime syndicate, he's done this stuff with Lozada. So when at the end, when it says the next adventure is Buckaroo Banzai versus the crime syndicate, you're like, oh yeah, he's going to go after the person that killed his wife and the person that let Lozada out. It's supposed to have a bit of an impact, but it doesn't because it's never mentioned in the film.
Yeah, I mean, there is that sort of, stuff that's missing in the editing that you've suggested before. And I love that you have read the novel and the comics and you know about this movie. It definitely helps me to appreciate, again, not necessarily what's on screen, but more, a lot of my favorite movies are movies where I accept the flaws because I can see a better version of it that, like, it's good enough that I want to rewrite it, there's potential there to be something really unique and special. But it's kind of just a blueprint or a first draft of it. Here's another thing that I don't understand. Okay, so, you have the watermelon, you have, certain things that, this package, I mean, certain things that aren't explained. Okay, so they make such a big deal out of, so Buckaroo gets this electroshock in the phone booth, right?
Yes.
And, okay, so that is the villains trying to, like, take him out?
No. So that is a because he receives, it's meant to be a call from the president and he can't get through. That is the good Lectroids giving him the ability to see through the disguise of the red Lectroids.
Okay.
So there's a further scene later on when they explain how they do it. So they produce a pheromone, which you obviously inhale, and it tells your brain what you should see. So you see them, and it looks like Christopher Lloyd, or it looks like John Parker looks like the Rasta, the black guy with the dreads. That shock, that zapping, sort of prevents Buckaroo's Banzai from Buckaroo's brain from being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
So then he's
being susceptible to this kind of like pheromone thing that's in the air.
Yeah. So then when he goes back into the conference room, he sees the three red Lectroids sat in the chairs, and that's when he's like, he points them out and makes the big statement, which again, like, should be like a big. It is a big moment, and again, if it was a different actor, I think you could play it up really cool. Because again, this is revisited a little bit later on. They're given, when they go out for the final bit, they've got those suits on with the snorkels on. And Banzai says, he says, by breathing through this will stop you from inhaling the pheromone, so you will see them for exactly what they are. And Jeff in New Jersey sort of takes an inhale and looks back to see what John Parker actually looks like, and he's like, "What the?" So they try to establish it, but that's what it is. That electric shock allows him to see the Lectroids as they actually are.
Right, and so and I did pick that up later in the movie, and he also has, as a side effect of this, anyone he touches gets electrified. It gets like a static shock.
Yeah,
right?
Basically, yeah. Which becomes
I'm
like a running joke.
I'm not sure how that goes away at the finale. But okay, all right. So I'm trying to understand this. Okay, but so I guess that phone call was from the good guys trying to give him the superpower or make him, so that to help out the great Buckaroo Banzai. Okay. He also has a vision of a formula during that he's struck by this knowledge, and he writes it on his hand real fast, which I don't know what he's using to do so. And then it's permanently like just on his hand. It's said to be the antidote. Then later on, so that's the antidote for the pheromones, and that's how they made that technology.
That's
later.
what they're breathing in, because he licks it and stamps it onto the Japanese scientist's head.
How does he know that's going to work? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's what they're breathing in through the snorkels.
See, I was like, what the hell is, it's the antidote. And then you have like a few minutes later, you have that death scene, which I kind of like, with Rawhide, where, the cowboy references get to be a little much, where it's like, and it doesn't quite go far enough where it's like permission to die, it could go for, but the cowboy stuff as an American,
it's either back off or lean into it.
Yeah.
If it really leaned into it and was like, it's my time to ride off into the sunset or something like that,
yeah,
go for it. That's what you should be doing. Rawhide's supposed to be the cowboy character. Play it like a cowboy. You should be played by a Texan, really, but yeah.
Okay, so you've helped me understand that. So what I was saying about the Rawhide scene is that's just a little after, and you find out that the aliens can spit this sort of like octopus-like, spider-like, starfish-like thing that bites you and poisons you, and there's no, and they specifically say there's no antidote, right? So I'm thinking like, so what is that? You just said you have the antidote written on your hand. Oh no, that's the antidote to this other thing that you haven't explained yet.
Yeah.
This is a different thing that there's no antidote for.
Yes, so there's a structural problem for the information as well. The explanations of things in this don't come in the right order. You have to, and again, I wonder if that's intentional because it wants you to think, it wants you to try and put the pieces together. Because even Buckaroo's confused at one point. Like, is it supposed to be intentional? If it is, fine, but at least give us something. So I agree with that because I've had to watch this film a number of times and read the novelization to fully get some of this stuff. And in other podcasts, I've talked with Mike Burton, who does his Star Wars. He's a massive fan of Star Wars. He does a big Star Wars podcast. And the number of times when I've talked about Star Wars with him, he's gone, well, actually, in this book or in this comic, that's explained. And I've gone, I shouldn't have to read the comic or the book to understand. And I'm now advocating for the fact I'm reading both the comic and the book.
No, you're not. You're saying I have this ancillary knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I can't apply it to, help you understand or not. But at the end of the day, the movie has to be judged on its own merits.
Yeah.
And you like it and or you don't, and it works or it doesn't. I mean, that's the difference.
Yeah.
The people who you and I are annoyed by are the people who are like, no. See, you have to understand. No, screw you. I don't have to understand anything, my friend.
Yeah.
It was not done well enough for me to understand in the movie. Therefore, it has failed.
Yeah, and this film does fail on that front. Like, you have to watch this multiple. Now, to be fair, a lot of the information is there. It's just not in the right order, and it's usually not part of the usual. It's drop lines or it's a part of a separate conversation where you're like, hang on, that goes back to that. This goes like your primer board.
Yeah.
I've got a Buckaroo board where I'm like, right, that bit connects to that. I know that. Right, let's just build this in.
Yeah, that's a fair, point. I mean, I definitely do, and I think there's a difference between stuff not being there, like you've cut the connection to the crime syndicate. Or the stuff with Penny. There's a difference between stuff that's not there and stuff that you have to see multiple times, but the information is there.
Yeah,
they're two totally different complaints. And I don't think there's anything wrong with something that you have to see multiple times to appreciate further nuances. I do sometimes object when things aren't presented in a clearer way where it could have been easy to do so. It's not like, it's not like Dune where you've got to be thrown into this other world and you'll figure it out eventually. But the thing you were saying about like how sometimes it's just like in quick lines gets back to what I was saying about how like the dialogue feels off. There are weird moments where like a super, super important line is said super quickly between two like unconnected lines. And then they spent like 5-6 lines like quibbling about something very minor, and I'll think, why am I getting all this dialogue here when I had to sort of like rewind to understand a key point?
I think, yeah, and again, I think this comes down to there are certain things they wanted to capture with this film, or at least trying to convey. And one of them is that all these guys live together. Yeah. So the Hong Kong Cavaliers spend pretty much all their time together. And so
It's kind of
there's
like a bathhouse situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes.
They can get you up.
No, well, I don't know what goes on behind that bunkhouse, all kinds of things. These are rock stars on the road. I'm sure there's stories to tell. But the thing is, these guys, they're trying to convey this idea that they have a shorthand. These guys could converse in a shorthand. They know each other, but also they're going to talk about stuff that's irrelevant. This idea of, and funny enough, this is something that does get my goat in other films when you have characters that are supposed to have known each other for decades or years, yet they only ever talk about the plot. And you're like, no, like I've got friends I've known for years, and we might have a specific thing we're doing, but I'm still going to have a side conversation about something that's completely relevant. But I also know that doesn't work in a film because it diverts from the plot, it slows the pace, it does all this other stuff. There's a reason this doesn't really happen.
And you can have references to things that people aren't going to understand. If it's like, oh, that's just like Mary. Well, who the hell is that? It's another Mary. Okay,
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. And so, there's a little bit of they're trying to almost do that a little bit, where they're trying to sort of show that how close these people are by having this sort of like you say, this sort of banter about other things, or sort of conversation with other things. So it's like, unfortunately, it does come at the cost of the primary plot, and so you do have to watch it multiple. So again, it's this thing of like, I get what they're trying to do, or at least I think I get what they're trying to convey. It's just not. It's one of those things that I can imagine. Again, if I was on set and you were a director or one of the writers or a producer or whatever, and you're watching this scene where they do this, or even like a table reading or a rehearsal, you'd probably go, I see what you're doing, and my note is, I get what you're doing, and I understand you want to show this in the characters. It's too much. Pull back on that. You've got to raise the profile of the the explanatory dialogue, and I just think that sort of is part of the. So I think that's what it is. I could be completely wrong, but that's how it feels to me.
Well, I mean, rule number one, it would seem to me, if I'm in that room, rule number one is the audience is, especially because you're expecting people to see this in theaters, and at this point, there's a videotape market, but it's still in its nascence. Might get played on TV a few times, but I mean, basically, people are going to have to understand this the first time through. So, I mean, if I'm in that room, I'd say, look, all of that's great, but you've got to foreground the plot. You've got to remember somebody who's going in blind, might not even be the smartest person. They're distracted by the popcorn next to them and they miss a line. How are they going to know? You've got a complex plot. The last thing you need to do is pile on top of a complex plot, not explaining things or explaining it 30 minutes too late.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like you say, it's if you either play it as a sort of a self-serious thriller where you've got to work through the plot details, or an Agatha Christie mystery, or it's a popcorn adventure and you need to be signposting the information so that when you get to the climax, everything's satisfying and everybody's on board. It's one of the, it's very few people that are able to mix the two. Very few directors are successfully able to sort of mix the two of having that sort of popcorn level enjoyment whilst having a relatively complicated plot, involved. Look at the sort of less successful Bond films where they try to make it sort of multi-layered villains, and everyone goes, no.
Yeah, you do get to the climax of some of those plots, and you say, wait a minute, why are they in Algeria again?
Yeah.
is this the only base? I don't remember any of these key things. And I think what you're saying about like the serial approach, some of the convolution of the plot might just be that, as a serial goes on, there's lots of chapters and there's lots of, okay, then we do this, then we face this, and the amount of information you need for any given episode should really be a couple sentences, right?
Yeah.
But there might be a paragraph of additional information that was relevant, might be relevant later, but you really only need that little bit to understand the action of the next section. And this doesn't do a great job at walking you through that. Or
no, it needs a scene. There's a plan setting scene at the end of this, and you need someone you need a section to go, hang on. What's going on? You need, you need a perspective character in this, because again, like you say, this film has 3 people that could be, other than Banzai, your perspective characters. Really, it has Goldblum as the guy coming into the crew. It has Penny coming in as a member of the crew. But then also, as you say, the book is written from Reno's point of view. So have one of his other, if you're not going to have it as Banzai, have it as the guy who's like the Dr. Watson of this crew, who's actually journaling all this stuff. Have him be the character that's conveying a lot of this information. Be the point of trying to provide clarity. And it doesn't have that. You've just got to accept. And there's part that I do enjoy, that I do kind of love that you just dropped into it and you've got to make sense of it. But even for Banzai, even for Buckaroo, you sort of like, he's the character you're following, but he's not interested in conveying information. There's lots of, he's working stuff out in his head. He does stuff and he sort of
he comes off more like an Elon Musk who likes to carry a gun than Indiana Jones, and I think it misses that. The other thing is you've got the kid can totally ask questions, right? You've also got the Rasta alien who is hanging out for at least the second half, who at least could ask any questions about the crew, right? Or like, hey, hold on a minute, you're putting the faith of the entire world. But at least they know Buckaroo's great or whatever. But, you've got lots of, your point is well made. You've got lots of people who could be asking those outsider questions.
Yeah. And so I think there's, again, it's this thing of like, it feels not amateurish, but it's almost like they're trying to do something, maybe not avant-garde, like they want to do something, and it doesn't quite hold up in this sense, because it requires like you become the perspective character where you're like, hang on, I've got to go back and sort this out and figure it all out. But it could be, and again, this comes back to this thing of like, if you remake it, could you remake it as a TV show, or could you have it as a film? Either or. But if you did it as a TV show, that thing of doing the banter between the crew, between the Cavaliers, can happen. You could completely have a scene between Reno and Perfect Tommy where they do discuss life on the road in the bus, and there's a sort of you give this background information. There's more texture to them as a crew. They have certain rules they have to adhere to on the road, or there has been a relationship with a Mary on the road, and it's Reno's lost love. It's the one that got away, or something that just gives that bit of depth. You can have that conversation. It doesn't have to be a plot. It's just a bit of character depth. But you can't do that in an hour 44 film. It's too many characters. It's not,
Well, so I was going to ask you, why don't you take some time to talk about the scenes or that you like the best? If you think that one in the sort of, I was going to say cabaret, in the nightclub, is one of the worst, and one of my great complaints is, ultimately, my takeaway was there's a lot here that's interesting. I want to like this, but it's just not fun for me. So why don't you take some time and just talk about some of your favorite scenes and how cool they are?
It is. cool scenes. It's interesting because it's sort of I get a sense of the whole. It's one of those things that sort of like when I break it down, like I say, I can easily pick it apart. Things I do like is I like the sort of the press conference they give. I even think the opener is quite good. I think there's moments in this film that are really good. So the opening scene, the theatrical opening scene where he does the test. He's supposed to be doing a land speed test. That's what he's told everyone it is. And then he's testing the oscillation overthruster. So then he diverts off and goes through a mountain. I like the fact that it's clear that both Tommy, Rawhide, and everybody in his crew know exactly what's going to happen. And obviously, that they've got the Secretary of Defense there and these other people, and they were like, "What is going on?" I like that whole scene because it sort of again it shows that he's a bit, not a loose cannon, that's the wrong word, but he only trusts within his group, and he does trust his group, and they're all in this together, and they each get a little bit of a moment, sort of just to show that they are a group. I do like that opening scene. And they've got full confidence in Buckaroo as well. He's charging at sort of 600 miles an hour towards. He breaks the sound barrier. Sorry, they say he's breaking the sound barrier as he's heading towards a mountain, and so they're all completely calm. They've got complete confidence in him. So I like that because this is almost before you really meet Buckaroo. You've not really met him yet, properly, but you meet the crew around him, and you get this sense of they've got complete confidence in him. And they're willing to do all this stuff for him to try this experiment that we know failed. If you don't, but according to this unaired opener, failed 30 years before, but they've got complete confidence in this sort of thing. So I do really like that opener. It's a strong opener for me to sort of go, oh, okay. And then when he goes through the mountain, you see the electroids, and he finds that fleshy thing on the bottom of the car. All that's a really good hook for me. I'm in. This is weird. I'm liking the characters. I'm liking the feel of it. I kind of like the press conference. There's a real naturalness to that press conference that I think is good. There's several moments where because he stands up and he's got that rock and he's explaining about the gaps between atoms and stuff, which is all very, very true. It all makes sense. And I like the fact Penny gets it. She clocks it and goes, "Oh yeah, this is what it is." And then she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he's like, "No, you're right." And he says he makes a really good point. He's like, "No. He says, "Oh no." She says, "I'm sure it's obvious to everybody." And he says, "Well, if it was obvious to everybody, we'd be doing this every day. So well done." He is conveying a compliment. But then there's Jeff Goldblum has one of the best reactions in this film. When he asks a question of the person stood next to him, and Buckaroo answers, and he sort of realizes he's sat next to an open mic, and he's like, he just gives a fantastic facial expression, then covers the microphone, and sort of leans away from it. All that is good. When there is a group, when they're acting as a group, I actually really like this film. I think there's some really good moments. The ending, I like the ending as well, when they're dotted around and they're all doing stuff. It's the only time this film starts to fall apart is actually when it focuses solely on Buckaroo Banzai. Yes, the scene with the nightclub is really problematic. But again, when the electroids invade the Banzai Institute, I like all that they break up, they split off, they're doing stuff. I like the groups that are together. It all works like that. All that bit is working for me. I find I'm invested in that. It's all good. And even the ending when they actually are doing invading the Yoyodyne propulsion. I'm invested in the adventure of it. As a group. So there are bits I really enjoy. I think are really cool. Again, when John Lithgow as Dr. Lizardo is torturing Buckaroo, I'm enjoying John Lithgow throughout all of this as well. John Lithgow can do no wrong. I think he's one of those actors. I thoroughly enjoy watching him. So he provides something that sort of I think is missing from a charisma point of view in this film. Every time he's on screen, like you say, and him and Christopher Lloyd especially in this film know what they get what the mission is, and so I enjoy watching them. And so there's just these nuggets of things that together I just enjoy the imagination. It sort of digs into my imagination, and as you said, it's one of those things where as a whole, I admit, like there are flaws in this film, and I fully accept why people are like, no, it's a piece of shit. Like this film doesn't work, doesn't make sense. But to me, like it just caught my imagination. I think some of the casting is great. I think some of the characters are really cool. The idea of Buckaroo Banzai is ace. It's as you said, it's one of those things I watch this and go, there's a really good film in here. Like there is an absolute stonker of a film in here somewhere that people would be like, this is the thing. This could be the film, if they were to really into it, that is that sort of satire of the modern superhero film. The sort of like it could do that and do it well as a sort of a satire comedy. Like, it doesn't have to be a parody, but a satire comedy that's really weird and falls into those tropes of and saying like, yes, this is how ridiculous Tony Stark is. This is how ridiculous those characters are. It could do that and do it well. So you're right. I sit there and I do rewrite this, and I've got it in my head how I would do it. But this one just caught my imagination. That's the sort of the key to it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself less in love with either the invasion of the Institute. There's one shot in particular where Barrel rolls down, and it's supposed to be a distraction, and I thought, why did we cut to suburban America? Like this clearly cannot be in and then it is, and that's just how the villains got. I mean, they're just weird things, or diving through the escape by I don't know. Again, because the tone isn't quite there. I don't know. Like, it's like, oh, okay, we're just supposed to. I mean, I believe that happened, and that Buckaroo dives after him because he's that guy. He's that alpha. Of course, I'm thinking, yeah, there's a guy at the end with a gun, and knowing you're gonna follow idiot.
Well, even for some of the other films, like I think of cliches of like that towards the end of this film, but that invasion, like again, there are massive budget restraints on this film. Like the Lectroid costumes are awful. Like you can see the rubber seams on them and all kinds of things.
And how bulgy the hands are.
Yeah, big foam gloves.
Yeah.
But there's bits in this film that I get what they're going for, and again, like with the barrel, with everything in that invasion, like I can look at other films and go, oh, they've done it better, or like I can see this as a trope that's been done elsewhere. And you say about the silliness or what it should be, that alpha. Like I think of Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. The scene at the beginning in the Hong Kong restaurant where he's after the diamonds and the antidote for he's been poisoned, and it ends with him hidden behind a big gong, rolling along, and he dives out the window, and the car's below. He falls into the car with Short Round, and Short Round drives away, and he's got blocks of wood attached to his feet so he can reach the pedals.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
Spielberg gives it such he's got such good timing and comedy sort of like affection for it that it works. It's ridiculous, but you've also everything that's gone up to that point. Like it's a slightly different tone to Raiders,
right?
But it works. You accept it, and I think it has a polish that I think it has that pulpiness that that I think this is missing. Like Banzai should go further, but again, like with and they go even further with Last Crusade. I think Last Crusade actually does it a lot. That really leans into some of the comedy moments, but does the adventure as well. Like that's the thing. It it has the moment with the boat being smashed up by the propellers in Venice. Yet it's then got the whole sort of thing of him. When you introduce Sean Connery and you get silly moments there, so it balances out that comedy and that adventure. And some of that's just missing in this, and I think at the end of it, it does definitely suffer for budget, but also for timing and production polish for that final scene. But again, because I've invested in it previously in the film, I'm sort of going, yeah, I'm sort of invested in this. But I definitely see that there's massive flaws in that bit.
Well, and I kept thinking about Spielberg, because he's so able to do that kind of stuff. which again, all. I mean, the other thing is Star Wars is completely over the top, but I mean, it's somehow able to convince you to go along with just the sweep of what's really fundamentally silly and doesn't make any sense. But it's the music, it's the look, it's it's that editing, and somehow, Spielberg, and that scene is a good example how, Spielberg can make stuff that's really stupid feel like, oh, that was fast. All the lines are perfect. I'm totally in the vibe of that scene, even though a slightly different edited version, slightly different music, another director, it would be so groan-worthy. It's not objectively the material; it's the way it's put together.
Yeah, and I think the 80s in particular were loaded with these things. So Back to the Future is another really good example. Like Back to the Future, in essence, and you and I have talked about this before, is like there are certain parts in that film that are ludicrous. Like they shouldn't work.
Yes,
but
most of the movie shouldn't work. Yeah, but it does. It works out. It fires at 95% or something.
Yeah, and it works as a whole because you've got, like you say, because the music, the editing, the cast, the direction, all holds together. So when you do get to moments when you're like, well, that doesn't work. That's not how that works. It's sort of, you go, I don't care because the next scene's ace.
Right. And I don't care because I'm having so much fun.
Yes.
I'm sold on the experience. So, asterisk noted, but, I want to see that next fun scene. Whereas with this, I sort of thought, okay, am I going to get a fun scene? But that was me.
Yeah. It's not top tier. There's a reason that this is quite an obscure film, really. But, I think more than for me, it's this thing of like, it taps into other tropes that I like. There's another film, and I'll finish off on this. There's another film from the 80s that tried to do something similar, tapped into a similar sort of vein. It's called Jake Bullet. No, Jake Bullet. That's no Jake Speed. No, bloody, I'm going to find it. Jake Speed, I think it's called. And it tried to do this whole pulp thing as well. It tried to tap into this idea of sort of like mercenary pulp heroes, like like Doc Savage and sort of thing, and has this big crazy adventure. And it has an odd. Again, it fails because it has this same tonal problem. Like it has a scene really similar to Taken at the beginning. Like these two women are captured in France, in Paris, and it's really brutal. And you're like, hang on, this is supposed to be a fun romp. This is supposed to be a silly adventure. And then like halfway through, it remembers that it's supposed to be a silly adventure and says, oh yeah, no, that's right, we're doing this now. And it does that several times throughout the film. And again, it's the same as this. Like there's a reason barely anyone's ever heard of that film. Because it didn't hit those marks, and it it just doesn't gain the momentum. And I think that's the same with this. It's sort of most people will watch this. I think the people that love it for the potential and for what you can get from it. Like you can rewatch it and gain so much from it. And I think there's a silliness to it that I enjoy. But yeah, this film is never. You couldn't play this at a cinema. You couldn't do like a retrospective of Buckaroo Banzai and then pack it out. I don't think it'd have that many people come to it. I don't think it has the cachet that I think. But then Spielberg loves this film. He openly referenced it in Ready Player One. So
yeah, and partially because of that, I thought, well, the one thing I know is that this is going to look cool, which it does not, and also. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and also it made me think about how much more fun Ready Player One is, which I think is quite a good movie. And not top 10 either, but everything works despite a bunch of stupid stuff, right?
Oh yeah, the plot to that film is absolutely horrendous, but it's framed in a really fun. It's what Spielberg does. He can take something and he can make you sort of enjoy the ride. I think he understands that these films are roller coasters and he'll take you on that fun ride. So he works well at that.
I was going to ask you before we end. And I was going to say it's not just old movies that do this. I mean, Nobody, that action movie recently, is a good example of a movie that can't decide on its tone. that
Mhm.
is quite an enjoyable movie, but starts as a very serious, like you were saying, and then by the end, it's like we're in red territory.
Yeah.
It's just over the top, and knows it, and is having fun with it, and it's still fun, but it's a different universe, and then so there are these movies that even today have these sort of weird tonal shifts. It's not something that's gone away. I was going to ask you, and I want you to say before we end, what was your first exposure to Buckaroo Banzai? I mean, in terms of like what this means to you, how has this been interwoven in Scott's DNA?
This is a university film, and I think that plays a big part, in why it's because this is a film that if I watched this when I was like 8, again, I think I'd be sort of like, it's an 80s film. It would probably be up there higher than it is now. But I watched this in the early 2000s. When I was at university, the local Odeon used to do like a retro Wednesday, I think it was, or retro Thursday, whatever. But they would screen like retro films, and they would do all the typical ones. Like I saw Jaws on the big screen, I saw Ghostbusters on the big screen, all the typical, Back to the Future, the Terminator, all those. And then they advertised Buckaroo Banzai, and at that point I was like, I have never heard of this film, and I thought I was a bit of a nerd. I thought I know my films. What is this? And one of the guys I played American football with said, "Oh no, this film's ace. Like we've got to go see this. Like, oh, I watched this loads when I was a kid. Like we've really got to go see this." So me and a bunch of us went to like he and I and a bunch of us went to see this film, and he and I came out going, "Yeah, that was quite good fun," and everybody else was like, "That was awful. I would want my money back." And so it really did split in that time, but at that time it sort of hit me, and I was like, "No, this film's weird. I don't understand half of what's gone on." It sort of stuck in my brain for after that. I never got it on DVD or anything like that. It was quite an obscure film. I don't think it was sort of readily available on DVD in Britain anyway, and so I didn't watch it for years. But it always sort of sat in my brain as like, yeah, that was I enjoyed that film. And then Arrow Video released it on Blu-ray. And so I picked it up pretty much straight away. I was like, oh, yeah, brilliant. They've released it now. And so I watched it, and it comes with all the special features and all the bits and pieces, and you can really sort of dig into it. And so yeah, I've just had it on Blu-ray since, and I just have watched it and that. So it's just sort of stuck there. But it was just one of those films that I think, again, if I'd have seen it a lot, it may have been either higher up or lesser down down my spectrum. But just seeing it with this enthusiasm when we were at university on the big screen as well helped sell me on this film of like, no, and because of my age, I think I was really trying to sort of get into different films. So like, this weird film from the 80s I've never really heard of, just sort of stuck in my imagination. And so I think that's a part of it that, like you say, it just hooked my imagination. There's something there. I can look at it now, like I said, and go, there's some real problems with this film. However, remake this film, and I think you've got something really solid. And I think that's where my head is at the moment.
Well, you've definitely sold me on that idea. That there is a sort of like, this is a watermelon egg, and there is a great movie inside that egg. At least a very fun, enjoyable movie that could really have legs. And it helps that you sort of know these intent, and you've been able to bring to this conversation, the novelization and understanding these things. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it also depends. Like, I have this theory that a lot of our reception to, especially more odd movies, that there's a sort of like tolerance that each one of us have for weirdness. Yeah. And some people don't seem to have any tolerance for it whatsoever. And then other people have what seems to me like an over tolerance, where just the idea that it's different is like, so they wind up, they love the worst aspects of David Lynch. And then you combine that kind of like spectrum of sort of like how much we crave the novel and the weird, which definitely is probably pretty high in both of us, but not at that extreme where we'll forgive anything. And then you combine that with age, right? Yes. So I can easily see that if I had seen this, like I mean, I probably saw this and never rented it in like those video stores where, I combed the tape section for anything that was weird or foreign. And if I had seen this at that time, I'd be like, this is my special movie.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about this. I kind of know it's a wreck, but it's also kind of brilliant, and it's mine, and
Yeah.
it's weird, and it's not the usual dumb Hollywood thing.
There are films like that again, I have an affection for a whole bunch of films that, like, I know aren't fantastic. Like, there's a couple of films that, like, I'll say to people, like, oh yeah, I love this film. Would you recommend it? Oh no. No. Like, yeah. You are not going to watch this film. Like, like you say, I really like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I watched that film in the early 90s when I was sort of like in my early teens, early to mid teens. And again, that film struck me as being like, it's weird, it's daft, it's funny. I watch it now and think, okay, like, yeah, the whole third act doesn't work. There's some special effects in it that are really bad, but I still really love that film. It's that weird little film that I love, and there are other films like that. And I know that people think the same of some of the Trauma films, like Toxic Avenger or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and
I quite love Killer Tomatoes.
yeah. Some of that's people, those films, like, you hit them right. Beetlejuice is a really good example of a generational thing. Like, I love Beetlejuice, like, and I'm a early Tim Burton fan. But I also know there are people that have come to that same age as me that never saw it as a kid, have come back to it in their 30s and in their early 40s and just gone like, no, that's dreadful. Like, that film's awful. Like, what are you talking about? Or it's too silly.
I don't understand that. I mean, it is a mess from a plot perspective, but I don't understand not being charmed by that movie.
And so there are people that like that go like, well, it's just too silly for me. I don't do silly. And you go, well, that's your lot then. That's unfortunately.
I'm pretty sure that person's watched a Marvel movie, so I don't believe that.
Yeah, but they wouldn't think them as silly. This is the problem. And again, I think this is the thing. Like, you and I love that. I do enjoy superhero films. But again, I think you and I go into these things and go like, oh no, like, the idea of Thanos is daft.
Yes.
Like, it's really silly. Like, we're going to half the population
or half the shit. It's not Chris Nolan Dark Knight. Okay, no. It's not an unrealistic universe.
But it has a sheen of being silly. And again, like, I have problems with Thor Ragnarok. But at least it leans in and goes, oh no, this is going to be batshit crazy. Like, we are going to go nuts with this one. And you go, cool, you can do that with these films. Do it.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah. And so, I appreciate it. So when people do sort of say, well, I like the Marvel films, but I don't like this, and you go, they're sort of in the same camp. Like, they just have a different budget and a quality. But you've got to acknowledge these things exist.
And are you aware of where your silliness meter really is?
Yeah.
There's something else going on there. And I think, where there's a bias not only in favor of Marvel, but there's also a bias against what people perceive as silly or what gets socially tagged as silly. And, what you said, what you said about liking movies but not recommending them, is to me such a key aspect of being a good critic. To know the difference between, I like this. I mean, sometimes I don't have a problem with, the term guilty pleasures, although I don't feel guilty. But it's those things that, we like, we're aware of their flaws, we can take them apart. And, I don't think that everybody needs to watch every G.I. Joe and Transformers movie. I know their flaws. I kind of love them, even despite their flaws. And you and I can see good things in these movies that we have that affection for. That affection does let us see things, just as it has in this film, that are objectively there and that aid your ability to criticize. But those things that you see don't overweigh the fact that there are, in fact, flaws.
Yeah, totally. No film's perfect, And again, this is where, like, dedicated fandoms do my nutting. At the moment, especially around superhero films, like Zack Snyder guys, he's an auteur. Go back and watch Sucker Punch. I've got real problems with that. Go back and watch 300. Like, he's got a real good style, but like you've got to acknowledge like there's some serious problems with some of these films. You know, like same with then you go even Spielberg. Like I'm a big I will acknowledge like Spielberg, made some fantastic films. He also made 1941.
Yeah. No,
You
he's a
know.
master, but that doesn't mean that everything he touches is gold.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's like I say there are a lot of films that fall into this category where I will say now, yeah, Buckaroo Banzai is a favourite of mine, but it's not one I readily recommend to people. I'm glad we got to discuss it, and I'm glad you got to watch it.
I'm super glad I have this reference point now, and I do think it would behoove me to watch it again, but I think I need a little space,
Yes.
to go back to it now, knowing what to expect. So then my expectations have been adjusted, and I can appreciate more what's there.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll appreciate it in the sense of like say this deserves a remake or a fine tuning. Because one of the things again, when one day we'll talk about remakes is like when they endlessly remake films that were successful in the first place, you sort of like, don't see the point. But if you can see a film and go, there was a nugget of something in that one, let's go back and give that a bit of a, let's see if we can pull the goodness out of that. Then you do get some excellent films.
Right. Absolutely.
I think The Fly is a really good example. Actually, we've talked about that. The Cronenberg Fly, complete reimagination, fantastic film. Often people forget that it's a remake.
Right.
Or even The Thing, which one day we will talk about, and I will defend Kurt Russell to the hilt.
Sure. Well, that's fine. I mean, and I've thought about doing The Thing. But yeah, this thing about remakes, there's this in literary theory, there's this idea of like a strong misreading, right? That basically like all of our ideas as critics and as artists are to one degree or another misreadings, of the original text, right? So, I mean, you have access to, the novel, you have access to some of these things, but the movie itself is not a farce. The movie itself is not a punch a minute, farce. But in looking at these things, we as artists or as critics spark things in our brain. And we say, oh, wait, that's a good idea. If you only did it this way, it would really work. Or I see the way you could hinge a plot around that. And then this and this and that would fall into place. And the truth is, what we're seeing and what excites us might be, 25 degrees off of what's actually really been presented. And when we go back and watch it, we're like, how did I get that? That's not really objectively there. But we see in it this possibility, and that possibility attracts us.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm digging into, especially with this film. Like I say, there's that possibility of like, and like I say, maybe because of what's in my head canon, like I give this film an extra sort of 10% of, compared to someone coming to it differently.
So stay tuned for Buckaroo Banzai remake starring Adam Sandler.
Oh no! I said someone with charisma. No.
Well, I'm just saying that here's the problem with remakes, dude. Is you wish for a remake, you wish for a sequel, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, no. That's why I want to be in charge. I don't know who would cast. I mean, the problem is you probably would get like Chris Pratt or something like that, completely again miscasting. They go, oh, you want to up the action and the comedy, right? That's Chris Pratt's thing. No. That's not what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
Like, I want someone with charisma. And there is someone out there. I just don't know who. If anything, I think it will end up being some quirky actor. But you still need that. You still need that charisma. You need that believability and that sort of like that they walk into the room and they're going to solve all the problems. Like that, they're a safe pair of hands.
Not a lot of actors really do that anymore. I mean, that used to be the trope, right? With all those action stars, Harrison Ford, Schwarzenegger, Stallone. I mean, all those guys portrayed characters who were this sort of like white male dream. I mean, there is a lot of privilege, right?
Yeah.
To this dream of like the white male who everything he touches is gold.
One thing I would say as well, this is a final note, we didn't touch on it. It's not really, it's worth noting. This is Buckaroo Banzai, his mother is American, his father was Japanese. Peter Weller's clearly not got any Japanese in him. Like I'd open up the casting. Like, you know, there's clearly someone, you know, some Japanese or Asian actor. Like, we could easily open this up, I think, to have a really cool. I don't know. There's someone out there that could play Buckaroo Banzai. But anyway, final thoughts. Let's wrap up there. We're going over. So any final thoughts on Buckaroo Banzai?
Well, I mean, I'm glad that I finally saw it. And I don't think it's a great movie, but I do think I can see how it's influential, and I can see how it's a sort of cultural touchstone that, you know, it's certainly good to see and be aware of, and I do think that it's worth revisiting.
Yeah, I'll be interested if you know, off air we'll have a conversation at some point. If you do go back and watch it at some point, you know, if it does change your mind having watched it multiple times. But yes, no, from my point of view, I do enjoy this film. I think there's a weirdness to it. I think it's good to dig into it. I'm sort of weird. I am strangely invested in knowing sort of the multimedia like of it. So there is that. But yeah, it's a good film. I enjoy it. You know, am I going to recommend it for those that are watching along with us? I know there are several that watch the films along with us. Like, you know, if you watch it, let us know. Like, come and tell us, what do you think? But also others out there, like, if you've been a fan of this since the 80s, or you've been a fan of this since when you saw it, let us know. Or if you've watched this and, you know, do you think it's absolute tripe and you know, what are we talking about? Let us know. Come find us on Twitter at PodTimeSpace. Go let us know what you know, or have we missed something? What's your interpretation of the watermelon?
Which one of us is right? The episodes are better when we fight. So, you know, Scott, you ignorant slut. You don't know anything about movies or science fiction.
I'm just a
Tell
movie
us who's
whore.
right.
That's it. I love all films. So yeah, but if you really like what we're doing, you like what we're talking about, go to your podcast catcher and leave a review, 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever you want to do. Any review is great. Gets us up those charts, gets people talking about us. And if you really like what you're doing and you really like these discussions that Julian and I have, go check out our Patreon. That's at www.patreon.com/20cgmedia, 20cgmedia. And even at the lowest level, even our sort of like our fan level, you will get Julian and I talking on a weekly basis we are trekking through the Twilight Zone. And we are sort of on to episode 9 as of the recording of this. We'll be up to about like 11 or 12, 13 by the time it goes out. So yeah, go check out our Twilight Zone. And there's a load of other bonus stuff on there, a load of other benefits for being on the Patreon. It's really good stuff. Go check it out. As usual, thank you, Julian, for talking Buckaroo Banzai with me.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for making me watch this. I might not have loved it, but I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah. Well, next episode is a musical episode again, and it's Little Shop of Horrors, the Frank Oz directed sci-fi horror comedy musical, lots of things. And another film that I've talked about deleted scenes and alternative versions for Buckaroo Banzai. We will definitely be talking about the alternative ending of Little Shop of Horrors. So,
which you alerted me to.
Yes,
and this was a mutual pick. I mean, and
yes.
You know, no quasi-straight man has ever loved musicals as much as I do. So,
this film is amazing. And so, but I would say if you're going to watch this film along with us, or even if you're not watching, but just go and check out. It's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. Go and watch the alternative ending for Little Shop of Horrors. It'll give you a very different perspective on what the film is about, or what Frank Oz really wanted to achieve with the film. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening along, and we shall talk to you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.